Today is our fourth talk on the theme New Thought for the new Roaring Twenties. And today's topic is the principle of divine guidance. This talk is based upon Unit 4 in the introduction of the Science of Mind text, and it's titled, How to Use It. When Ernest Holmes wrote this book, The Science of Mind, he began by saying, one of the great difficulties in the new order of thought is that we are likely to indulge too much in theory and too little in practice. As a matter of fact, we only know as much as we can prove by actual demonstration. He went on to say that the world at large has not yet come to consider the principle of mental practice in the same light that it considers other given principles of life and action. It's apparent intangibility is lessened, however, and whenever and wherever anyone actually demonstrates the supremacy of spiritual thought force over apparent material resistance. So that was then, 1926. This is now. In the 94 years since Holmes published that book, a steady stream of individuals have been knocking at that door through spiritual practices developed through study, through experimentation, and through the ever-expanding metaphysical ideas offered by authors, by movie producers and directors, by the teachings of such organizations as Unity, Centers for Spiritual Living, the Association for Global New Thought, and through colleges, universities, and organizations. So the University of Sedona, for example, in Arizona, offers metaphysical bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees through what they describe as the world's largest metaphysical university system. Their curriculum is based upon the following statements, and this is from their website. Metaphysics acknowledges and respects the beauty in all of God's creation. Metaphysics is religion without dogma. Metaphysics does not explore religious beliefs and laws created by mankind, but rather it explores the immutable laws of nature set by the Creator, God, universal presence, whatever your choice of name is, in the creation of the universe. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that studies the ultimate nature of existence, reality, and experience without being bound to any one theological doctrine or dogma. Metaphysics includes all religions but transcends them all. Metaphysics is the study of ultimate cause in the universe. Metaphysics is the only science capable of inquiring beyond physical and human science. So the availability of materials from which to learn in today's world, as compared to in Ernest Holmes' time, is remarkably increased, as you can see. One could even say it's much easier to discover how to use it. That is, if one chooses to do so. Because the realization that we have this ability must be gained by the application of our knowledge. The practice of the science of mind or other metaphysical teachings calls for a positive understanding of the spirit of truth, a willingness to let this inner spirit guide us with the conscious knowledge that this is a fact. And to recognize that when our thought is in accord with this principle of divine guidance, Nothing can hinder it. So in Holmes' chapter titled How to Use It, it being what he called the thing itself in the first chapter, he stresses deeply the use of affirmative prayer. Just as a reminder, the thing itself is that the mind we discover within us is the mind, capital M, that governs everything. And the affirmative prayer that I speak of using, of course, is spiritual mind treatment. Have you ever noticed that you never stop thinking? Have you ever considered that thought is a limitless force? Do you ever question how to use thought? You know, I'm seeing some interesting looks on faces because these are mind jerkers. Have you ever thought about thought? No, we just do it, right? It just grinds sometimes, endlessly. Yeah. You've all heard me refer to a book by Ernest Holmes, a book that Ernest Holmes wrote, titled The Magic of the Mind. I don't let this out of my bookcase very often, but it's here this morning. The Magic of the Mind. But did you know, because if you don't have one, probably not, did you know that there's a chapter in this book titled The Power of the Mind? And in that chapter, he reminds us that our thoughts and ideas are the molds or channels through which divine creativity can flow. And although it is our privilege to make the mold, we have no responsibility for the action which results. What did I just say? What did Holmes say? What did he mean by that? No responsibility. Fortunately, he goes on to explain exactly what he meant by that, saying concentration and willpower are not creative factors. Instead, they are but the means by which we may give definiteness to our thoughts. The only value that concentration and willpower have is to keep our thinking directed toward our goal and bring into sharp focus the ideas we have come up with about the specific good we desire. These abilities are not and cannot be the cause of the action that results from spiritual mind treatment, although they do enable us to definitely establish a new pattern of thinking. The action that results from spiritual mind treatment finds its source in the very nature of the universe. All that we need to do is to establish in our own mind the pattern of ideas by which and through which its action will take place. It's much like holding an object in front of a mirror and having the image reflected back to us. He says we have nothing to do with the reflection of the image. This is automatic and in accord with certain definite laws. But if we wish to have a mirror reflect an image, there is the obligation on our part to first hold up an object for the mirror to reflect. I think that example is brilliant. He gives us a description of something we easily understand, and in doing so, we also get a clear picture of the image. That is, what you think about, pray about, comes about. Or, in other words, as true today as in biblical times, it's done unto us as we believe. In a moment of lightheartedness, Holmes quips, "No doubt there are many times when we wish that the law of mind did not work so perfectly or infallibly. For without question, there are many, many things that we let our thought dwell upon, which we wish would not have become a part of our experience. So what he's saying is what you send out there is what comes back, positive or negative, for your highest and best or something lower. A thought came to my mind as I contemplated that statement. There is a song in our extensive collection of metaphysical music that we are currently researching to find so we can play it for you. And the song contains these words: our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers. Listen to what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a place of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought becomes a prayer. By next week, we'll have that so you can hear it and perhaps sing it. Many of you are familiar with the name Greg Braden. I've shared some of his writings before and have a different one to share this week. He's written a number of books, 20 plus now in the 21st century. And his mission is to bridge science, spirituality, and what he calls the real world. His two newest books are titled The Science of Self-Improvement and The Wisdom Codes. The information I've chosen to share with you this morning, though, is from this book, which is titled The Isaiah Effect: Decoding the Lost Science of Prayer and of Prophecy. In a chapter that is titled Secrets of Prayer and Healing. Now, this is a man who comes from the scientific field. His profession was that for over 20 years before he began writing these books. But in this chapter titled Secrets of Prayer and Healing, he describes traditions such as those of the Essenes and Native Americans who suggest that our relationship to the world extends far beyond the role of observer. This reminds us that we are a part of all we see. The very act of observing places us in the role of participant. I never thought of it that way before, but it certainly makes sense as he describes it. It's a beautiful treatise on what he describes as the observer of any event becomes part of the event just by the act of observing. That is a huge concept that deserves the attention of every metaphysician, in my opinion. It's right up there with you are what you think, or you don't see it if you aren't it. Anyway, in this chapter, he addresses the question, why prayer? He was conducting a 3-day seminar when during one of those sessions, a voice came from somewhere back of the room. It was a large room, an auditorium, really. And with the bright lights on the stage and the room in front of him dimly lit, he really couldn't see his audience clearly. But because an important part of his teaching was honoring each audience, he always acknowledged the questions that were certain to arise in any meaningful discussion. So he gently asked, "Who asked that question, please?" Directed by the gestures of the audience who were pointing to the left, he stepped off the podium and walked to that aisle in hopes of eye contact. And at the same time, an audience facilitator with a microphone met him at the row where the fingers were pointing. "Here I am," a very frail voice echoed. "Good," he said. "What is your name, please?" "Evelyn?" A tiny voice answered awkwardly into the microphone. "Evelyn, would you please repeat your question so the audience can hear?" "Certainly," she replied. "I simply asked, why prayer? What good does it do, really?" Braden said he heard the question that she was asking, and he sensed an innocence underlying it as he listened to her words. The thought went through his mind that in his circle of friends and colleagues, the role of prayer and prayer's relevance were common themes of their everyday discussions. They talked about the applications, they talked about the origins, they talked about the techniques of prayer. But in his recollection in those conversations, they had never discussed the actual purpose of prayer. Well, for him, this was one of those moments that occur rather rarely. He said somehow her question threaded its mind through the centers of logic and reason, slipping into the reality of the moment. He admitted to himself silently that he had no idea what he was about to say. One by one, though, the words tumbled from his mouth, surprising him in the exact instant each was formed from his mouth. And how easily each of those words flowed. How concise was his reply. "Prayer," he began, "is to us as water is to the seed of a plant." That was it. 13 words. That was it. Then he took the time to consider what he had said before he continued. And after a rather lengthy pause, he said, "The seed of a plant is whole and complete unto itself. Under the right conditions, a seed might exist for hundreds of years simply as a seed. Only in the presence of water will the seed realize the greatest expression of its life." We're like those seeds. We come into this world whole and complete unto ourselves, carrying the seed of something even greater. And it's in the presence of prayer that we blossom to fulfill our potential. He said, he looked at Evelyn, and there was a broad smile on her face. He sensed she already had known that answer, and that the whole room would benefit from hearing his words that might not otherwise have been spoken that day. He said, "In those moments, Evelyn and I did our work well together." New words for the new roaring 20s. Certainly a new way of expressing them. Divine guidance. Well, it is a principle and always present. And so it is. Thank you.